Thank you so much for your patience as we figured out some of the logistics here. Welcome, new friends and old, to the Ukrainian Institute of America. Thank you for being with us here this evening. For over 75 years, the Ukrainian Institute of America has been at the forefront of presenting and showcasing Ukrainian culture in every form. We thank you for your continued interest, not only in this evening's program, but also for your support of Ukraine in the horrible war against the terrorist Russian state now in its 11th year. Since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, now more than 2 years ago, we have introduced a practice of observing a moment of silence at the beginning of each of our programs. I now invite you to stand and observe that moment of silence in recognition of all of those who have paid the ultimate price and have sacrificed their lives to defend the sovereignty, democracy, and borders of Ukraine. Thank you. This evening, we are honored to welcome an extraordinary woman of remarkable achievement, whose tireless efforts have shaped and continue to shape the course of history, Oleksandra Matviichuk, who is the founder and driving force behind the Center of Civil Liberties, recipient of the 2022 Nobel Peace Prize. The Center for Civil Liberties is a prominent human rights organization based in Ukraine. It works unwaveringly to protect and promote civil liberties, democracy, and the rule of law in the country. The center monitors human rights violations, provides legal assistance to victims of abuse, conducts advocacy campaigns, and engages in litigation to hold authorities accountable for their actions. More specifically, the center focuses on issues such as freedom of speech, assembly, and association, as well as combating torture, arbitrary detention, and discrimination. In addition, it advocates for the rights of vulnerable groups, including internally displaced persons, refugees, and minorities. Finally, it continues to promote the right to criticize power and protect the fundamental rights of citizens. Through its work, the Center of Civil Liberties demonstrates the significance of civil society for peace and democracy. Oleksandra's unwavering dedication to the pursuit of justice and human rights has not only earned her international acclaim, but has also inspired countless individuals around the globe. Joining Oleksandra in this enlightening conversation that's about to happen is none other than our dear friend, Oksana Matiiash. She is the first Ukrainian Obama Scholar at Columbia University and CEO of Teach for Ukraine. Oksana's remarkable leadership and scholarly pursuits have propelled her to the forefront of advocacy in the area of educational inequity and the pursuit of empowering students to reach their full potential, thereby contributing to the overall development and prosperity of Ukrainian society. Together, they will delve into the crucial topic of Ukrainian women in wartime, shedding light on their resilience, courage, sacrifices, and invaluable contributions to the nation's struggle for continued freedom. Please join me in extending a very, very warm welcome to both Oleksandra and Oksana as we embark on this enlightening journey of dialogue, reflection, and revelation. Thank you.
I'm not good with the mic, so I apologize in advance. I want to start with thanking, of course, the Ukrainian Institute of America and Katerina and Lydia for inviting me to moderate such a profoundly important discussion about the role of women during the wartime. As we are entering the third year of the Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Ukraine continues to inspire the world. The Ukrainian people have demonstrated such a profound level of resilience, but especially women. Ukrainian women have become international ambassadors for Ukraine. They've also become internal and global leaders. And of course, Oleksandra is one of them. Before we begin, I want to provide a little bit of context for the conversation. And I want to start with, of course, remembering the fact that right now we have more than 62,000 women who have joined the armed forces of Ukraine and who became defenders. It amounts to almost 7.3% of the armed forces of Ukraine. And this is probably something that most of them have never imagined before. I think something even more important is the fact that now Ukrainian women are not only defending Ukraine, but they are also taking upon very many leadership roles that in a lot of cases Ukrainian men used to play. We have seen that Ukrainian women have been at the forefront of the humanitarian response at the beginning of the large-scale invasion. These were Ukrainian women who provided a life-saving humanitarian response to their communities, their families at the beginning of the war. These are Ukrainian women who became the family and community leaders, and I'm more than sure who will become leaders of the future of Ukraine. At the same time, women have been disproportionately affected by the devastating impacts of the war. And the fact that millions of them have become displaced and lost their livelihoods, they have also been disproportionately affected in terms of the gender-based violence, war-related violence. And Oleksandra has been an advocate for human rights for more than a decade. And I think I want to kick off our conversation with a question that many Ukrainians probably have been asked before. So on you being in the human rights advocacy for more than 10 years now, or maybe 20, would you share with the audience a story how it all started for you? Because for most of Ukrainians, it didn't start on the 24th of February, it started way long back. Thank you.
First of all, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to organizers of this event for this unique opportunity to meet with this audience. It's an honor for me to be here, and thank you for your time. I am a human rights lawyer, and I was lucky for right people in my life, because when I was studying in school, I got acquaintance with Ukrainian dissidents. And one famous Ukrainian philosopher, writer, and former political prisoner of the Soviet Gulag, Yevhen Sverstyuk, he suddenly decided to take care about me. So he ingrained me in the circle of dissidents, and it was like brilliant opportunity to see and to experience the people who tell what they think and do what they tell, who was brave to fight against the whole totalitarian Soviet machine, who have no other tools but just their own words and their own position. And it's not so little. Who were repressed, who were jailed, part of them were subjected to forcible psychological treatment. Some of them were killed, but they didn't stop. So, being a child, I was so inspired by this example that I decided myself to study law and to continue this fight for freedom and for human dignity.
I've been following your work closely since, I think, for 10 years now. But the large-scale invasion really changed a lot of probably the scale on which your work has been done. I think every Ukrainian who was in Ukraine on the 24th of February 2022 remembers that day in minutes, maybe by seconds. I remember it very well when my sister called me at 5:30 a.m. and she said the war has started. I'm like, what are you saying? I mean, go back to bed. Of course not. She was living in a little bit outside Kiev, so they started hearing explosions earlier, and it was just hard to believe. And after 5:30 a.m., everything became blurred. But I think we all found ourselves with one life mission to do as much possible to help Ukraine win this war globally and domestically. Can you share a little bit where you were on that day and how it shaped your your efforts afterwards?
I also remember this day very well. I got up because someone called into my door, and it was probably 5 p.m. in the morning. And I was so surprised. Who can call at 5 a.m. in the morning to the door? And my husband went to the door to open, and like it's automatic routine, took my phone to look what's going on. And I saw dozens and dozens of missed calls on this phone. And I dial up the last one, and that's how I get know that Russian troops started large-scale invasion and bombarding Ukrainian cities. I was unbelievable calm this morning. I don't know why. Probably because we all expected that it can be starting sooner or later, so now it has already started, so everybody know what we have to do, and with our members of the team we had agreement that we will gather in the office, and based on the scenario of this large-scale invasion, we will decide what we will have to do. But there is no sense to go to the office at 5 a.m., especially because I have no car and there is no taxi working in this morning.
It was very expensive taxi, probably.
No taxi at all. I'm tried. So I had planned some CNN interviews this morning, so I decided, okay, I will do it at home. And we even had a breakfast with my husband. And then after these interviews and working calls, we decided to went to my work and his work by foot, and it takes probably one hour and a half. It was an unbelievable experience because you suddenly saw how your native city lose all colors. It was empty. It was empty, and we was looking just some cars near houses, and people packed their luggage in these cars. So then I went to office, and we start this all days and nights work with my team. And here I, frankly speaking, can't remember the day minute to minutes because it's become a daily work routine. I decided not to evacuate. I was in Kiev with a part of our team when Russian troops started to circle Kiev, and it was a very scary time, frankly speaking, because we have no idea whether or not Russian troops will be in your streets of your native city next morning. And probably you remember, and this is very important from my own experience, that not just Russia, but also our international partners were confident that Ukraine will have no power to resist. Because Russia is so enormous opposing power. Russia was 11th economy in the world. Russia has a much greater military potential, nuclear weapons, a much bigger population. So we all witness how international organizations, even international humanitarian organizations, evacuated their personnel. But ordinary people remained. And ordinary people started to do extraordinary things. And it were ordinary people who helped to survive under artillery fire. It were ordinary people who took people out from the ruined cities. It were ordinary people who rescued people who dropped into the rubble of the residential buildings. It were ordinary people who broke through the encirclement to provide humanitarian aid. And suddenly, it became obvious that ordinary people fighting for their freedom and human dignity are stronger than even the second army in the world. So this is my experience, which I want to share.
I can really relate to what you're saying. And forgive me for being a little bit emotional too. I think I want to start the next question with a quote of yours. At least in times of war, we suddenly seem to have gender equality in Ukraine. Women are currently at the forefront of the battle, equal to men. Recently, I read a story of Halina, who has been working at the Ukrainian railway station for like 20 years or something. And that was the story of Halina, how she had to learn really hard technical skills recently because currently the Ukrainian railway service is experiencing shortage of manpower. So now women need to step up and do really hard job of repairing trains and other, have equipment to run the only means of transportation that Ukrainians can use in order to get outside the country and inside. So can you share a little bit about, the unique experiences that Ukrainian women have been seeing throughout the war? Every single Ukrainian has suffered, but I think what Ukrainian women have, seen is also very unique.
You're totally right. And when journalists ask me about the role of Ukrainian women in this war, I'm hesitate what I have to answer because I know enormous amount of fantastic women in different fields of Ukrainian society. Women joined Ukraine armed forces. Women take important political decisions. Women coordinate huge civil initiatives. Women document war crimes. Women are in the far front of this battle for freedom and democracy because bravery has no gender. And when we speak about the role of Ukrainian women, it's also a very good point to explain the value dimension of this war, because this is not just a war between two states, this is a war between two systems, authoritarianism and democracy. Because in Ukraine and in other democracies, a woman can play the role which she wants. But in Russian world, women can play only a assigned role for her in family and society. And this is a basis for the authoritarian regime, because established relations between people in society always reflect a society's idea what power can do toward their own people. In this way, the personal become political. And that is why in Norway, men and women have equal rights. In Afghanistan, women are prohibited to study in university. And in Russia, even domestic violence are decriminalized because once again, it's always just a projection what government do towards its own people. And that is why in this war with Russia, we Ukrainian women are fighting for our daughters. We are fighting for our daughters, that our daughters will never face a situation that they have to prove someone that they are also human beings.
I think this will be my new favorite quote, that bravery has no gender. Being here in New York for the last year, I think has changed my perspective a lot in terms of, the kind of leadership that we talk about and the kind of leaders that we in Ukraine used to admire. And I think right now, it's about every single Ukrainian. For me, my leaders are the women on my team. I have 33 women of different ages, 1/3 of whom they have now their partners and their husbands fighting in the front line. Every single time when I wake up here in New York, after another air siren or attack on Kiev, on Lviv, they just, keep going. They keep working, no complaints, they keep pushing. It's just remarkable and incredible, the level of resilience, the level of inspiration each one of them demonstrates just by being there and by showing up to work, doing all the commitments, and even more in these circumstances. Can you share an example of, a civil society organization or a grassroots movement that is currently led by a woman in Ukraine that, really inspires you?
Probably I also share the story of my friend. And I just saw her picture in this beautiful exhibition in the first floor. I mean Ukrainian writer Victoria Melina. She joined our team when large-scale war started. She wrote to me that she is working about a book devoted to role of women in this war, but parallel she wanted to help us to fight for justice. And she joined me in a lot of advocacy trips. We spoke together in British Parliament. We together convinced French parliamentarians in favor of special tribunal against Putin and his surrounding. Victoria was extremely brave. She always had such feeling that she's doing so little and she has to do much more. So she started to document war crimes by herself. And she very regularly went to different mobile groups visit to the occupied territories. She was those war crimes researcher who find this diary of killed children writer Volodymyr Vakulenko. Without her, probably we will have no such diary, and she for sure will do much more, but she was killed by Russian rocket when with a group of Colombian writers, she went to the east of Ukraine, and she was in this cafe in Kramatorsk, which was deliberately hit by Russian rockets. So I lost my dearest friend. But why it's still inspirational story? Because we have a lot of long conversation traveling, and I know that Victoria knew that as a human, with all her human efforts, she can't change this war, but without her efforts, nothing will be changed. And this is very important truth, because sometimes when we face with such enormous challenge as large-scale war, we can feel learned helplessness. Because we are humans, we are not God. What we can do, how we can stop it. And we have to overcome this learned helplessness with understanding that all efforts matter, that ordinary people can have a much greater impact than they can even imagine. And mass mobilization of ordinary people in different countries can make the history.
So whenever there's war, women and girls, they always have to pay the highest price. And it's just the statistics that we're seeing all around the world. And Ukraine is, of course, no exception. And for more than a decade, you have been a very renowned human rights advocate. So can you share examples of some, human rights violations that Ukrainian women have experienced, but also the human rights violations that you have seen throughout your work in other parts of the world? Because I do think we all have seen how many support has been coming to Ukraine from many parts of the world. It's particularly for women who have been also through very devastating events themselves. So could you share a little bit more about that?
When large-scale war started, we united our efforts with dozens of regional organizations. We built national network of local documentators. We have an ambitious goal to document each criminal episode which was committed in the smallest village in each oblast in Ukraine. And working together, we jointly documented more than 68,000 episodes of war crimes. 68,000 is a huge amount, but it's just a tip of iceberg. because Russia uses war crimes as the methods of warfare. Russia instrumentalizes the pain. Russia uses the pain of people in order to break their resistance and occupy the country. So I always tell that we are documenting not just violations of Geneva and Hague Conventions. We are documenting human pain. And unfortunately, there are a lot of episodes devoted to crime against women and children in our database, and probably I will share with you one story. This is a story of 13-year-old boy, Yelysei Rybakon. His mother took him and his younger brother to one village to Kiev region. It was the logic of people from big city that probably in villages it will be easier to survive. But this village was occupied by Russians. So this family hid all days and night in the basement of their building. And they have no food, no water, and it was very dangerous just to be here. And his mother told that she begged the Russian soldiers to allow her to drive her children by car from this dangerous zone. And Russian soldiers seems to agree that they even waved them like wishing good journey. But when several cars with women and children started moving, Russian soldiers started shelling. The car immediately stopped and people from the car started to fall on the road. Among that was this 13-year-old boy, Yelysei Rybakon. His mother told that Russians didn't allow them to take body of dead people, and later they didn't allow to bury these people and her son among them in cemetery, so she have to bury him in the garden of her own household. And she told our documentator that everything which she left from her son, it was the white t-shirt, which they all used on their jacket just to show that civilians are in this car, and a red hat, which is cut with shrapnels. And I think why I'm sharing this story, that probably is the worst things which can happen in your life when you buried your son, when you buried your own child. And you can ask me probably why Russian soldiers killed these women and children in their civilians' car who just tried to save them and escape from the dangerous zone. The only answer which I have, because they can.
And unfortunately, there are many more stories like that. And we know that many women have lost their children, their husbands, but despite all this loss, they continue fighting for Ukraine. Something that I want to ask next is about, in Ukraine, we have let me put it this way. Ukraine has never been very progressive in terms of like gender equality. Something that we have in terms of gender equality, it's more on paper rather than in practice. At least it's how it was before the large-scale invasion. And I do hope that the fact that so many women have taken leadership roles, this will stay with us post-war, and we will be included as women leaders in the decision-making process to decide the future of the country. But not only women who are leading civil society organizations or community groups have been showing an extreme level of leadership. I want to quickly share a story of one of our school principals in the Kyiv region. So Teach for Ukraine works mostly with schools in villages and rural areas of Ukraine. And Kyiv region, as we all know, it was many many communities were temporarily occupied by the Russian forces. And the school principal in one of our school partners, she was fighting to renovate her school for 10 years. She was fighting with her local budget to bring those resources, to refurbish her school, to bring new computers on board. So when Russian soldiers entered in her community, Hromada, she bare hand, if that's how you say it in English, she was protecting those computers, and she was herself going in front and saying, "I will not let you in." And guess what? They did not get in. So that one woman, very tiny, middle-aged Ukrainian woman, showed such an incredible courage in the moment when the worst things could have happened. But at the same time, she's based in the region that was occupied. Kyiv region has been, of course, freed from the Russian soldiers, but many territories in Ukraine are still under the temporary occupation, and we have a lot of women who are staying there and who are disproportionately affected by the war. Can you tell a little bit about the experiences of women who are close to the front line, those who are more subject to, war-related violence, stories of specific women that you can share, or women groups that represent those communities?
Probably before sharing the stories, I will refer to a very frequent question which I always been asked. And the question is, why Ukraine will not give up part of the territory just to stop this war? Because war is so horrible. Let's stop human suffering. Let's stop fighting. I always answer that Ukrainians want peace much more than anyone else. But peace doesn't come when country which was invaded stop fighting. That's not peace. That's occupation. And occupation is horrible. Occupation doesn't decrease human suffering. Occupation is just another form of the war. And I know this because I have been documenting war crimes for 10 years. I know that people under Russian occupation live in constant fear, in a gray zone. They have no tools how to defend their rights, their freedom, their property, their lives, and their beloved ones. Occupation is not just changing one state flag to another. Occupation means enforced disappearances, rape, torture, denial of your identity, forcible adoption of your own children, filtration camps, and mass graves. This is Russian occupation. And let's be honest and say that you propose Ukrainians to leave our people alone for torture and death under Russian occupation. And you know what? We have no moral rights to do it. It's our people. And now a story. I started the documentation of war crimes with my team in February 2014. We was the first human rights organizations who sent mobile groups to Crimea and part of Lugansk and Donetsk region, which were in just several weeks occupied. And for first several years of war, our main focus was this horrible practice of illegal detention, abduction, sexual violence, torture, and killing civilians in the occupied territories. And I personally interviewed hundreds of people who survived Russian captivity. They told me how they were beaten, raped, smashed into wooden boxes, their fingers were cut, their nails were torn away, their nails were drilled. They were compelled to write something with their own blood. And one woman told me how her eye was dug out with a spoon. So it's horrible stories. And we very often face with stories of sexual violence, which, I'm sure is the most hidden crimes in all kinds of wars. But Russians use sexual violence as a method how to save control over the region. How it's work? The technology is very simple, because sexual violence in all cultures is still a crime of shame. The survivors of sexual violence, they feel shame. Their relatives, their neighbors, their families, and very often this rape was occurred on their eyes, they feel guilt because they can't stop it. And other members of the community, they feel fear because they can be subjected to the same treatment. And all this complicated mixture of shame, guilt, and fear decrease the connection between people in the community. And this has helped Russians to save the control.
Thank you so much for sharing these stories. I think telling the story of a specific person or a specific community is much more powerful than giving all the statistics in the world. I will ask now my favorite question, and I did spend some time to formulate it, so I will read it so that I don't make any mistakes. So you've been Ukraine's global advocate for a while, and especially in the last 2 years, meeting all kinds of people, heads of states, being able to advocate on behalf of Ukrainian people and Ukrainian women. But how do you navigate the delicate balance between raising awareness about the suffering of Ukrainian women and avoiding the portrayal of victimhood that undermines their agency and resilience?
Because we are not victims, we are fighters. I can tell thousands of stories, but I will stop on only one story. The story of women who were subjected to sexual violence and tortures, and they created the group which is called SEMA, and they started to help other survivors of sexual violence, men and women, in this war. When you look to these women, you can't say that they are victims. For sure, from the legal point of view, they are victims of the sexual violence, and they will be in court, I hope international, and their perpetrators, as well as Putin and top political leadership and high military command of Russian state, will be brought to justice. But when you look to these women, you have confidence that they are not victims, they are fighters.
Thank you so much for this. I do have maybe 1 or 2 questions left before we turn the mic to the audience. My maybe pre-final question. Let me see which one. Yes, this one, exactly. I think we have, of course, in the audience, probably people from Ukraine, also American Ukrainians, and hopefully a lot of foreigners too. And we have seen that, it's obvious that Ukraine and Ukrainian people have been able to stand against the enemy because we have also been receiving such an enormous support from all around the world. And I do not mean here governments or presidents, I do mean just regular people, individuals. And a lot of them are also, asking a question, and we know this especially in the US, questioning where did all the support went to, and why we're not seeing Ukraine winning the war just yet. So my question is the following. Do you think the international community responded effectively to the needs of Ukrainian women during the war, and what gaps have you seen, and how have you been trying to communicate them to the world leaders that you have been meeting?
I will use this question as an opportunity to express our sincere gratitude to all people in the United States and other countries of the world for your solidarity and your support with Ukrainian people in this dramatic time of our history. We'll never forget this. We are very grateful. It's very difficult to be alone in a large-scale war. Thank you. The problem is that when large-scale war started, the civilized world told, let's help Ukraine not to fail. And this is at least something, because Ukraine obtained the first weapons to be able to defend ourselves, and first real sanctions against Russia were introduced into force. And once again, we are grateful. But this is also an explanation why Ukraine was waiting for a first modern tank for more than a year. Why we still have no modern plane. Why we had to start our counteroffensive without any possibility to secure Ukrainian sky. While I start to check my morning with checking Messenger, because when I go to bed, my friend, Ukrainian writer who joined Ukraine Armed Forces, told that now we are in trenches, we are waiting for massive Russian attack with heavy weaponry. We have no heavy weaponry. So it was his gentle way to say me goodbye. Because there is a huge difference between let's help Ukraine not to fail and let's help Ukraine to win. And we can practically measure these differences in types of weapons, in speed of decisions, in gravity of sanctions. Now we are in a very critical situation. Only officially, Russia will spend 40% of their budget for military expenses. Russia is preparing for a new massive attack in nearest months. While military support for Ukraine in the United States is blocked. I'm human rights lawyer, I'm not politician, I'm diplomat. It's very difficult for me to understand how it can happen when we have two-party majority support and several people blocked this package, which is critically needed. The problem is that we have no time. We are dying. The time for us converted in numerous deaths in battlefield, in numerous deaths in deep fear, in numerous deaths in occupied territories. But while I'm still optimist, because I know when you can't rely on international system of peace and security or responsible politicians, you can still rely on people. And we need your help. We need your voice to tell Speaker Johnson that he has to make his job. Because I know sociology, the vast majority of people in the United States want to support Ukraine. We have to make this wish visible for congressmen. And people can probably ask me why people in the United States have to care about people in Ukraine. The naive answer, but I will allow myself, because once again, I'm not politicians, I'm not diplomats, because probably we're all people. Probably because we're all human beings and we have to take responsibility and to care about each other. Because only when we start to care about each other, we are acutely aware what does it mean to be human. But also I have pragmatic answers as well. Because the world needs success of Ukraine. This is not just a war between two states. We see the formation of the whole authoritarian bloc. Iran provided Russia with Iranian drones. China helped Russia to bypass sanctions and to import technologies critical to warfare. North Korea sent to Russia more than 1 million artillery shells. Syria votes for Russia in UN General Assembly. If autocrats support each other, democracies must support each other even stronger. because we are fighting for freedom, and only freedom and spread of freedom make our world safer. And I will use this opportunity, because I'm here in this audience, and kindly ask you to do something to make politicians in the United States of America known that they have urgently unblock this package and help Ukraine. Democracies must win wars.
That was very powerful. Thank you, Oleksandra. And final question for me, something probably about the future. A lot of people here in the US ask me about, the life in Ukraine. How was it? How is it? And when I tell them that children keep, getting education, people keep leaving, people keep going to restaurants, people keep living their life because they're hopeful for the future. But they're also very hopeful about the opportunity to rebuild and reconstruct the country that they envision for themselves and the country that they're fighting for. What future do you envision for Ukrainian women post-war, and what role do you think they should be playing in the post-war recovery?
It's a good question, because it's allowing me to tell you that Ukrainians see Ukrainian victory in very ambitious way. Ukrainian victory means not just to repel Russian troops out, to restore international order, and to release people in occupied Crimea, Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson regions. But victory for Ukraine also means to succeed in democratic transition of our country, which means to build a democratic, stable institutions which provide us a chance to build a country where the rights of everybody are protected. Men and women have equal rights. Judiciary is independent, government is accountable, and police do not beat students who are peacefully demonstrating. But the truth is that we don't know. Either we're in the end of the war, in the middle of the war, or just in the beginning of the war. This means that we have to do our job of recovery and of democratization now, even in the frame of large-scale war, which is not easy. I'm not very, I don't have very deep knowledge about American history, but I know for sure that it takes some time for United States to build democratic institutions. So for sure you can find source for critiques, but still they are working. And we have only 10 years. Because only 10 years the authoritarian regime in Ukraine collapsed, and we obtained a chance for democratic transition. So that is why we have to ensure now the role of women in all process of political decision-making, all discussion about future peace, in all decision about recovery, etc., etc. There is no luxury for us to postpone it after the war.
I am going to ask that, we do want to do a number of questions. Please make your question a question, and please just one per person, and if they could be brief, that would be great. First row.
Thanks.
My question is a question, but it's actually going to be a little bit longer because I have to read something. And Victoria Megina was also my friend. And I once actually asked her about something Philip Sands, the great international lawyer, said, that he doesn't think that every case is going to be brought to justice that you were documenting right now. And I just want to read Victoria's answer, and I think she would be okay with me doing that. She writes, розумієш, рідна, sorry, it's in Ukrainian, розумієш, рідна, що ми тут зрозуміли за час війни? Що дорослі – це ми. Я раніше молилася на Сенса теж, але моя подруга, юристка з Боярки Києва, з ним не згодна. Я все думала, ну він же юрист з Лондона, вона з Боярки. Але тут така штука. На днях ця моя наївна подруга отримала Нобелівську премію. The question is really, do you still think that every case that you're documenting can be brought to justice and justice for victims is possible?
Thank you for this question. Let me answer this question with a story. This is a story of one photo, which was made 13 years ago during the Balkans War. You can Google this photo very easily. In this photo, you can see Serbian military who kicked the elder woman who lay on the ground. On this photo, two other men in civilians are laying on the ground near her, and there is a pool of blood. And when you look to this photo, you have impression that probably all these three civilians are killed, and this Serbian military kicked their dead bodies. So 30 years passed, and 1 year and a half ago, the group of international journalists decided to discover the story of this photo. They used only open data, and they identified the Serbian military. They revealed that he has never been punished. He became a successful career as DJ, and he still plays and perform in concerts and festivals. So what I want to say with this story, for decades, it was perception that it's sad but normal, that when we have wars on huge human rights crises, you can't provide justice for each victims of these events because of the enormous numbers of crimes. I challenge this norma. Now, as a humankind, we technically equipped to provide justice to each person. We have digital instruments to document what's happened, to restore the events, to collect evidence, to identify perpetrators, which we can't even dream of several years ago. People with smartphone, just simple smartphones, can make essential photos and videos, and sooner or later will get access at least to part of this information. The work of Bellingcat and other human rights investigators convincingly proved that in order to restore what happened and identify perpetrators, sometimes there is no necessity even to be on the spot. So it's possible. We have to overcome our mental barrier. We have to set ambitious goal. We must move further. We're in the 21st century. We must develop our legal infrastructure in a way which we developed our new technologies. And that is why I still believe that Victoria is right. And that is why I still believe that it's our task. We as Ukraine can make a precedent. We can change the global approach to war crime justice. We can show that it's possible to give at least a chance for justice to each victims, regardless who they are, their social position, the type of crime they endured, and whether or not media or international organization is interested in their case. Because we're written for centuries in our declarations, conventions, constitutions that life of each person matters. Now it's time to prove it.
Hello, Oleksandra. It's wonderful to meet you in person rather than virtually. I'm Dr. Danieli of the International Center of Multi-Generational Legacies of Trauma. And we've been working, as some of you know, with Ukrainians colleagues, including with your generous help. My question is about Ukrainian society. I totally agree with all of the dreams and the plans that you share. And, you know, we work with the Office of the Prosecutor General also in the direction of victims' rights, etc. Is Ukrainian society ready to take women as equals and victims with dignity and respect, rather than with guilt and shame? Because from the colleagues we work with, for example, who treat raped women, they say that most raped women are treated outside of Ukraine because there are no provisions or enough provisions. I want to be careful here because I work just with what I'm told. To work with raped women in Ukraine, but in Ukraine itself. And my concern as a psychologist is what happens then when they come back home. Even if they are supposedly healed, are they coming back home to a society that looks at them with shame and guilt, rather than helping them? So would you reflect on these two questions?
Thank you for these questions. I think we as a society in the right way. In September 2019, Office of General Prosecutors created a special department devoted to sexual violence. So they trained investigators and prosecutors to specialize on this very sensitive type of crimes. For sure, it needs time to build this human-centric infrastructure, because we have trained lawyers, we have educated judges, we have worked with society in general. But once again, we are in the right way. What the problem is that we have no luxury to concentrate only on this way. I mean, to investigate what happened and to help survivors of something which have already been done, because the war is still going on. And that is why we have also to concentrate on the question how to stop it. Because while we all sitting in this beautiful Ukrainian Institute of in New York, the sexual violence is going on in the same second, in different place of detention. We know about this place. We know about people who are there, not about all, but at least of some of them. And we have no tool to relate them. So I think we have to concentrate only on this. How to stop Russian war crimes, how to stop Russia, how to release these territories and release these people. And I think you asked about justice. It was a question about justice and appropriate treatment with dignity of people who were affected by this war, but probably I will make a link with something also very important. We Ukrainians in this war fighting not just for ourselves. All this hell which is going on now in Ukraine, it's a result of total impunity which Russia enjoyed for decades. Russia committed horrible crimes in Chechnya, in Moldova, in Georgia, in Mali, in Libya, in Syria, in other countries of the world. Russia has never been punished. Russians believe they can do whatever they want. So we must break the circle of impunity, not just for Ukrainians, not just for people who have already suffered from Russian war crimes, but also to prevent a next Russian attack to the next nation.
Hello, I'm Rena. I'm Ukrainian, and I'm Ukrainian artist and cultural worker. I've been meeting with presidents. I've been taking part in panel discussions in Germany. And you know, everyone are talking about soldiers, and of course it's important. And everyone are talking about people on the occupied territories. But what I paid attention to, that no one is talking about women, mothers, sisters, daughters of soldiers. And you know, I want to know because when soldier dies, sometimes it happens, you know, in Ukraine, the family still lives and they live very traumatized. And now our government are talking about making some institution like psychological institution for helping soldiers, but no one are talking about psychological institutions on how to help women who have to live with it and have to raise their children, because the next generations is the future of Ukraine, and if the future of Ukraine will be take care of traumatized people, it will not be healthy enough. And I'm, as a human being, and the person whose family is still in Ukraine and who was living in war for some months, and now my region is heavily bombed. I want to know how to live with it, because my brother is on the front line, my friends are on the front line, some of them are already not on this earth, and I want to know just how to live with it, and there are some tools how to solve this problem, because this problem is huge and it's not vocalized at all. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this important question. I will also edit several categories of members of families, because we also work with families who don't know the whereabouts of their beloved ones. We also work with families, civilians and military were captured by Russian and detained. It's also a very huge problem which is not articulated properly, that we have thousands and thousands illegally detained civilians in Russia, and according to international humanitarian law, Russia has no right to detain them. Russia can capture soldiers, but have to provide them appropriate treatment and medical support and other things according to the Third Geneva Convention, but Russia has no right to detain civilians, and we have thousands and thousands people in Russian captivity. And their family, they live between a huge contrast of hope and total despair. And I have no simple answer how to stand this horror. But I have hypothesis, because now being in Ukraine, you understood that millions of people are suffering. Millions of people are suffering. You can get this trauma just from watching news, what's going on in your city, or just looking around. You can get some problem with mental health. And it's not possible to provide for millions of people individual psychological treatment. For sure, we have to do something with it. There are a lot of things which has to be improved. And now we have our partners, international organizations, the volunteers initiatives, the states start to do something with psychological assistance, but still it can't cover this million of people. And my hypothesis is that we have to ask support of you as artists. Because I think that we have to find a way, a creative way, how to transfer this pain in energy which enabling life. Probably with some rituals, probably with some ideas which we can visualize in arts or in our environment. I don't know, but we have to do something. We have to change social patterns, because it can have influence for millions, while we can't provide for each person from these millions individual psychologists. So this is my hypothesis. And to describe more detailed what I thinking about, I remember this symbolical gesture which James Maines invented when he put candle on the window in memory of people who died in Holodomor. Now it became the all Ukrainian tradition. This is something which wasn't imposed by state, but some enthusiastic, honest people. So it means that we can do this job by ourselves. We can invent something for our society to help all of us to overcome this pain.
We're going to have stamina for a few more questions.
Sure.
On this side.
Hi. Thank you very much for your speech today. And my question is specific to the investigation of the war crimes and the legacy of this war in Ukraine. We know that there are Russian political dissidents that speak against the Russian government, although many of them are either jailed, exiled, or silent. What sort of relationship, in your opinion, should human rights activists and Ukrainian advocates forge with those dissidents? And do you think it's going to help or hurt our efforts in the long run in your investigation of Russian war crimes?
Thank you for this question. It's not a surprise for this audience that me and my team, we closely cooperate with Russia's human rights defenders. We had this cooperation before war started in February 2014. Then we intensified this cooperation when the war started in February 2014, because with several months they were part of territory which we can't reach. And our Russian human rights colleagues went there when we asked them to collect some evidence or to gather some information or to do something with using their repressive Russians law, but to save people's life in detention. And now we start to work on daily basis when the large-scale wars began, because we have, as I mentioned before, thousands and thousands illegally detained civilians. And for us, the only way to identify where they are and to use not law, because law doesn't work in Russia, but some human connections just to get information about them, or to provide them medicine, or just to send them message that we are fighting for them. The only possibility for us to do it, it's the hands of our brave Russian human rights colleagues. The problem is that our brave Russian human rights colleagues is a tiny minority in Russia. The majority of Russians either supported this war or they took this very cynical position that the government know better. I like this conclusion from one sociological survey where one of widespread statement which people in Russia shared with the sociologists, that if we started this war, we have to win it. So this is a way of thinking. And this means that Russian human rights colleagues have struggled not just against Putin's regimes, but also against the dominant public opinion in Russia. And this is very vulnerable position, because it's much more easier when you struggle against authorities, but you have support of your own people. They have no support of their own people. And that's why I'm very grateful for their honesty and extremely bravery. And just several weeks ago, my friend and my colleague, the head of Russian Human Rights Center Memorial, with whom we shared the Nobel Peace Prize in 2022, was jailed. He has 71-year-old. He was jailed because he wrote an article which called "How Russia Became Fascist State." And you know what? Last time I spoke with him before the judge announced verdict, and she told me that I want to prove by my own example, that everything which I wrote in this article, that Russia is fascist state, is true. So he's now in jail. And to end on the optimistic note, because it's a very difficult story, when I refer to my Russian human rights colleagues with question, you always helped us, what we can do for you? Because human rights organizations in Russia closed. The people labeled like foreign agents, part of them had to escape from the country, part of them still there and can be jailed any moment. They always respond, if you want to help us, please be successful. Because only success of Ukraine and military defeat of Russia will provide a chance for democratic future of Russia itself. It's not a guarantee, it's chance. But this is a huge luxury to have at least chance.
Hello, thank you so much for a very inspiring conversation. I just wanted to ask about the new bill that was signed by Zelensky lowering the draft age from 27 to 25, and if you foresee any short or long-term implications for women, perhaps a vacuum or filling a vacuum in the workforce or anything like that.
I'm sorry, what kind of draft of the bill?
Oh, sorry, the draft of men into the army.
Okay, thank you. We have already a law about mobilization, and now Ukrainian parliament discuss amendments to this law because they discussed to make the age of mobilization more lower. And this is something which I always been asked, because in United States you have this age 18. In Ukraine now we discussed to make this age to 25, from 27 to 25, thank you. Not 18. So I'm not a military expert, but when I was asked why, I said that Ukrainian society probably want to protect youth. So, but it's still a discussion. There is no such obligation for women in this law. But regardless of this, 60,000 of women are volunteeringly joined to Ukraine Armed Forces. And among them, my friend, Andriana Susak. Andriana Susak, when large-scale war started, she left her 6-year-old son and joined Ukraine Armed Forces because she told, I have to fight for my son peaceful, democratic future. And she was among those Ukrainian defenders who released Kharkiv region. He took part in the battle for Kherson. And she was blown up in a mine in civilian car. Several days she struggled for her life in hospital and she survived. And now she is still in this long period of rehabilitation, but she planned to return to her service because she told, we have no luxury to be tired. If we stop fighting, there will be no more us. Because this war has a genocidal character. Putin, in his recent interview to Tucker Carlson, told once again and repeats this genocidal claim that Ukrainians do not exist, that we are the same nation as Russians, that we have no our language, we have no our culture. And for 10 years, we have been documenting how these words became a horrible practice. When Russian troops deliberately exterminate active local people on the ground, mayors, children writers, journalists, musicians, human rights defenders, any active people of community. How they banned Ukrainian language and culture, how they destroyed Ukrainian cultural heritage. And even when we tell about this forcible deportation of Ukrainian children to Russia, it's also a part of the genocidal policy, because you took the children from Ukrainian national group, you deliberately transferred them to Russian national group in order to bring them up as Russians. And these Ukrainian children in Russia are told that they are not Ukrainian, that they are Russian children. So we have a choice, let's say like this, either to be re-educated as Russians or be killed. And this is not a choice. That's why we will fight. We'll never stop fighting. Okay, now we have this problem with military support. And my friend in trenches don't know whether or not he and his colleagues will be alive till next morning, because we're still waiting for this Russian attack. But we all know that we have no other choice. If we stop fighting, there will be no more us.
Will you allow me just to share a real life anecdote about the manpower, because you asked what implications it will have for manpower potentially, right? I recently had a conversation with one of our Teach for Ukraine supporters in Ukraine, and they owned a medium-sized factory. And it was a very interesting conversation, because that person was sharing how they introduced last year a special training program for women to bring more women into this heavy sort of like technical skills job. And he said, you know what? They're doing better job than men. So the fact is that even before the war, sometimes some, business people, some factory owners, they were not even considering men for certain positions. But war is making them now to reconsider that. And I think this will be one of the very positive developments for Ukraine's education workforce. And finally, they won't have enough arguments to, say that women cannot do conventionally men's jobs. So I do think that, despite everything, we will still, and we are still seeing already some positive developments for Ukraine's society future.
Wrap up, but I just thought of one more question, and I have the mic, so sorry. Your comment earlier was so beautiful, that bravery has no gender. However, the theme of our evening is women. Will it take women to end this war?
I can't allow myself to speak on behalf of all Ukrainian women, but probably I will get support saying that we don't know how our personal story will end in this war. Because war is a lottery. Even if you are not in the Ukrainian armed forces, there is no safe place anymore in Ukraine where you can hide from Russian rockets. And that is why when we go to bed, we have no 100% guarantee that we will have a luxury to get up next morning. Because war, it's a lottery, and probably your residential building will be hit by Russian rocket this night. But what all Ukrainian women know for sure, that freedom will prevail and we will succeed. And it's not naive perception, because okay, future is unclear, but future is not pre-written, and we, Ukrainian women, have a chance to fight for future which we want for us and for our children. And this is a huge luxury to have chance.
Thank you both so much on behalf of Kathy and myself and our other board of directors members here and our whole community. It's been a beautiful evening. Thank you for sharing, both of you. We invite you and everyone else across the way for a reception.